What's up, you guys, and welcome back to the Televised podcast. My name is Anna, and today we're going to be talking about my favorite shows and a few movies of 2021, of this past year. And Happy New Year to everybody listening. I'm really excited to start a new year. I feel like obviously the past 2 years now have been really rough for everybody, so I hope everybody's doing okay, and I wish you all well in this new year. But yeah, so I felt that I thought 2021 was a really good year for TV in particular. I feel like I watched an insane amount of just really good TV this year, and I really enjoyed it. So I want to just kind of highlight a few of my favorite things that I watched this year. And I didn't watch a lot of movies this year, though. I really didn't. So I only have a couple of movies that I just kind of want to touch on briefly, but other than that, it's mostly going to be talking about TV this time. So I don't have these in necessarily any particular order, so I'm just gonna kind of go and just talk about them. They're not necessarily in oh, this is my top 5 and this is number 1. It's just kind of I'm just gonna talk about shows that I liked. So one show that I really adored this year was Arcane. Arcane season 1 on Netflix. It is a show based on League of Legends, the video game, and it's genuinely one of the best animated shows I've ever seen, period. It's beautiful, it's stunning. It's very similar to Into the Spider-Verse, where when you're watching it, you can feel the way that it's going to change animation in the future, which is a really cool thing. And I think that they were maybe partially inspired by Into the Spider-Verse and how they animated that movie and then brought it into Arcane and maybe decided to be more experimental with how they made this show. It was just really great. It's a really phenomenal show. And I've never played League of Legends before. I don't know anything about the lore. I don't know anything about the canon. I don't know anything about League of Legends, period. But I really enjoyed it. And I think that the show did a really good job, especially across its 3 separate acts. I think it did a really good job of bringing the viewer into the show without necessarily knowing or having to know anything about League of Legends or really any of the lore. It told me everything I needed to know. And also, I think the show proved that it is possible to do a really freaking good video game adaptation, because obviously it's in the industry, it's kind of been known as a curse if you try to do a video game adaptation, because 99% of the time they do not work out. For me, one of my favorite video game adaptations is the Tomb Raider movie with Alicia Vikander, but I know a lot of people also did not like that and did not think it was a very successful adaptation. And then obviously there's just been a long string of just awful video game adaptations, with the exclusion of, like I said, Arcane, and for me, Tomb Raider, and then probably the Sonic movie, but beyond that, and Detective Pikachu was pretty good, but really beyond that, it's very hard to make a good video game adaptation because of how the storylines are set up, and that is something that I think a lot of people had issues with the Tomb Raider game, was that they tried to condense this 15 hours of playthrough into 15 hours of story into 2.5 or 2 hours, however long that movie was. But I think that's what made Arcane and the first season of Arcane so good, was that they managed to do the pacing so well. And obviously they had 9 episodes to tell this first part of the story, and I think that it just worked so well with the 3 episodes for that flashback, in the past with when they were younger, and then obviously 6 episodes to deal with moving into the future. And then obviously I think that's where we're going to stay for season 2. And of course that huge cliffhanger at the end was so insane, but I don't necessarily, I don't necessarily want to do spoilers in this episode just because if you haven't seen these shows, I want you to go out and watch them. So I'm going to be kind of vague, but I really enjoyed this show. And I loved, of course, this was one of the Steinfall offerings, the one of the 3 shows that Haley Steinfeld was a part of in November. And if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a huge Haley Steinfeld fan. I love her so much. I've been a fan of her since Pitch Perfect 2, and it's been incredible to watch her, just explode in popularity this year and do these incredible, amazing projects. And personally, I think that she is truly one of the only face actors who can truly move between face and voice acting well, because there's this trend going on in the animation industry where instead of hiring actual voice actors to do their job, you instead hire the biggest name that you could get to put on the poster, and it works out sometimes, but it's they're not voice actors, but I truly feel like Haley is one of those that can actually go between and does face and voice acting so well. I mean, obviously she's also was in Into the Spider-Verse. She played Gwen, so I think that really she is one of the only face actors who I ever want to actually have a voice acting career. And of course, I can't talk about Arcane without talking about the soundtrack. So good. I mean, and that's another way that it reminded me of Into the Spider-Verse, where it just had this incredible soundtrack from Spider-Verse, and then obviously they kind of incorporated music in a very similar way in the Arcane soundtrack. Had a very singular sound that they wanted to keep on, and kind of industrial-ish, they had Paris on it, they had Imagine Dragons. It's great. Such a good soundtrack, and this show is so worth watching if you have not before. Like I said, it's on Netflix. It's only 9 episodes, so it's a pretty quick watch. I did it in 2 days, just because the episodes get kind of heavy. And you can watch them in 3-act increments because that's how they were released on Netflix. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. So the first act is obviously the first 3 episodes, and then the second act is the next 3 episodes, and then the final 3 episodes is the third act. Honestly, I would just recommend watching them 1 act at a time, just because it's that one arc that you kind of get between each one. So but yeah, if you haven't seen the show, you have to watch it. It's incredible. It's so worth your time. So another Haley Steinfeld project that I loved this year, obviously, was Dickinson. If you've been a long time listener, you know that I adored Dickinson season 1, and I talked about making a Dickinson season 2 episode forever, and then I just never got around to it. But I do think that Dickinson, especially season 3, was some of the best. It was the best TV that I watched this year. It truly was. And it's crazy because we got Dickinson season 2 in January. I think it premiered January 8th of 2021. And then Dickinson season 3, which was the final season, premiered November 24th or something like that. Or no, November something. I can't remember. It premiered in November though. And it's crazy that we had these 2 seasons of this wonderful show in the same exact year. It's crazy. But obviously, I don't know why they cranked them out so fast. I truly have no idea, because it's only been about a year since the first ever. No, it's been 2 years. Oh, I know why. Okay, it's because of COVID. I think it was because of COVID. Because I think that they were trying to have a season out in 2020, probably in November, so that they can do 3 Novembers in a row, but then probably ended up having to push it back because of COVID. Anyway, mystery solved. But it is really hard to believe that we got 2 seasons of the show in a single year, but we did, and it was wonderful. I mean, like I said, this is one of my favorite shows of all time, but season 3 especially was just so incredible. I think the finale was the perfect way to kind of like cap this show, and especially to end like Emily's youth and like this really prolific time in her life after, during the Civil War. I think it was just like perfect way to set up everybody else's roles as well, because it was kind of weird. You would think that a finale where the main character doesn't interact with almost any of the other characters in the show, it would be like jarring and dissatisfying. And honestly, I'm going to be honest, at first it was jarring because I was like, that's it? Like, we don't get any more interactions between, especially like Emily and Sue, or even like Emily and her mom, or Emily and Austin. I was like, what the hell? Like, we're just going to end the show and she stayed in her room the whole time? But I get it, because it's like episode 9 was meant to be that like end of series, sort of like everybody gets together one last time to hang out together before the series is over, give the fans that like community, that, or the like group vibe that they want to see, the friendships and the connections, and especially Emily and Sue and all of that. We got that in episode 9. So then episode 10 acted as the way to kind of like lead everybody out into the future, where obviously historically, as we know, that like Emily stayed in her room a lot of the time. Like, she wasn't a hermit by any means, but she did spend a lot of solitary time in her room. She didn't see Sue as often as maybe she would have liked, because she would write to her quite often and say like, Susie, whom I have not seen, I still love, stuff like that. And so it's not like it was unrealistic, because everything in the show is historically accurate, quite literally everything. But it was jarring for like a hot sec, But it was really interesting too to see, obviously, Emily be set up to have this arc of being stepping into her own and making her poems for herself, and she writes poetry because those are the feelings that she felt and she wants to do it for herself. And I thought that was wonderful, especially because throughout the seasons she's gone through these arcs of like, who am I writing for, why am I writing? And at the end of season 2 she decided that she would write for Sue and only for Sue. And that led to a fractured relationship with Sue. So then she decided, you know what, I'm going to have a relationship with Sue and I'm going to write for myself. That doesn't mean that she's not going to ever write for Sue ever again, but she's not hinging her artistic, merit on her writings and musings for Sue, which was really interesting. And I loved how then the finale set up Sue as Emily's protector, like the protector of her legacy. Like, she confronts Mrs. Dickinson being like, hey, we can't mess this up, which is historically what Sue kind of was. I mean, her siblings asked Sue to be the one to like clean and prepare Emily's body for her funeral. Like, that's how much Sue was as a protector to Emily. And I love that. And then obviously like Lavinia as a performance artist and like a wonderful and supportive sister, because then she's the one who gets the poems out of the case and doesn't burn them, And I loved it. And I loved season 2, obviously, but nothing will top season 3 for me. It was just so good. Every episode, there was not a single episode that I didn't like. And for me especially, I loved the moments when they would dive into Emily's subconscious. There was a couple of episodes toward the end where, you had the Sylvia Plath episode, and then you had the Inferno episode, and all of these moments back to back, and taking those deep dives into Emily's mind, I thought worked so well. And especially for a character who was so imaginative and so in her head and so like, just introspective. And I think it was such a cool way to showcase that introspection, to showcase how she's looking inward at herself, what her inner desires are, what she believe, what her reality, how she interprets her reality within her own mind. I loved it. It was just so good. So another Apple TV Plus show, which let me just say, Dickinson, you can stream on Apple TV Plus. If you don't have Apple TV Plus, you could sign up and they give you like a free trial for like a million years. So, or if you recently bought an Apple product, you get Apple TV Plus free for like a whole year. Even if that trial is just for a week, which it might be, I'm not entirely sure, you can genuinely watch all Dickinson as a whole in a week. You can, truly, because it's only 30 episodes. Each episode is only about like 20 minutes long, 25 minutes long. So it's like super quick, super easy to get through. It's wonderful. And Haley Steinfeld, of course, is incredible. She's an incredible actress and she puts on an incredible performance. And you can stream it all on Apple TV Plus. Another Apple TV Plus show, like I was saying, that I really liked this year was The Morning Show. I watched season 1 of The Morning Show this year, even though it did not come out this year. It came out about 2 years ago. And again, this one was also kind of pushed back due to COVID. So it's been like 2 years since that first season came out. And then finally, a new one has come out. And I ended up binging the first season, and I think that was a mistake, because the first season is incredibly heavy. It's incredibly heavy, and watching it, like, in such a short amount of time made me feel really bad. Like, it was just, like, a really heavy, deep, dark show that I just was like, oh, God. But the second season of the show is not quite as heavy. It's not quite as good either. So, but I think that the good outweighs the bad when it comes to season 2. Season 1 was heavily focused on the Me Too movement. If you don't know, the show is about a morning talk show, sort of like Good Morning America or the Today Show, and one of the co-anchors of this show, which is called The Morning Show, gets accused by multiple women of sexual misconduct and sexual harassment. And then it kicks off this whole entire thing where they kick him off and all this stuff. And it's a really interesting show. Steve Carell plays Mitch Kessler, who was the guy that got booted. Jennifer Aniston plays Alex Levy, who was the co-host. She was Mitch's co-host, and then, this whole thing like kickstarted a very intense downward spiral for her. And then Reese Witherspoon plays Bradley Jackson, who is this like spunky firecracker Southern reporter who ends up kind of getting tied into Alex Levy's web and the morning show's web. Season 1 was really good, and I don't think anything will ever top the season 1 finale. It was just incredible, like chills. It was so good, and like I said, season 2 was not quite as good, but I think the good outweighed the bad, in some ways. So the good elements of this second season were Bradley Jackson and Laura Peterson. I think Bradley's journey with internalized homophobia, being outed, coming out, all of those feelings, as an older woman, I think that was so important and so pivotal to show on screen. And I mean, I've said it before, I don't think the coming out narrative is outdated in any way. I truly do not think so, because homophobia still persists in real life. There's just no way that we can stop ever telling the coming out story unless this, homophobic violence ends in some way. So I do think that it was a really cool story that they decided to tell. And Reese was incredible in this role, and it was just really wonderful to watch Bradley deal with these emotions and deal with these things while having Laura Peterson, played by Juliana Margulies, as this kind of like rock that kind of grounded the show, because she's like the only one that doesn't like scream every episode. But I just think it worked really well to have that dynamic between the two of them, where Bradley is kind of like this, I wouldn't say unhinged, but I would definitely call her impulsive and things like words similar to that. She's impulsive, she's fiery, she's passionate, and she's like opinionated. And Laura Peterson, on the other hand, she's opinionated, but she's like stern, but also soft, but also calm and quiet. And I think that was really needed to balance out this show, because it does get over the top so much because of all the yelling and all of these crazy like manic characters that they have on this show. So I do think that it just worked really well to have Laura there. And I love the relationship between Bradley and Laura. I think it worked really well. I'm excited to see where it goes in a potential season 3. It has not been renewed yet for a season 3. So, watch at your own risk. This one is also on Apple TV Plus. It's 20 episodes, season 1 and season 2. Like I said, though, season 1 is a really rough binge. So just kind of pace yourself if you decide to watch. But I do think it is a really good show to watch and really interesting, especially because of what the first season brings up. But then even in the second season, it just is really interesting how the show decided to deal with kind of like losing a person to quote unquote cancelization, even though I wouldn't even use canceling as a word for Mitch Kessler and what happened to him. But and also, like I said, the outing and the internalized homophobia with Bradley was really interesting. And also, I think it brought up an interesting conversation about like family and toxic family. And I don't know. I just think it was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. But I really enjoyed it because of those standout elements. Also, just based on the season 2 finale and also other things, I am officially an Alex Levy hater. Like, I just like that season 2 finale. Just, oh my god, I'm an Alex Levy hater. But obviously, nothing against Jennifer Aniston. She is incredible in the role, but just, oh my god, girl, jeez. Like I said, though, that one is also available on Apple TV Plus to stream if you are so inclined. The next show that I want to talk about is one that actually made my list last year as one of my favorite shows of 2020, and that is Motherland Fort Salem, but season 2 of Motherland Fort Salem. I really, really enjoy this show. I was gutted when they announced earlier this year that season 3 would be the last. I hate that. I think that this show needs a million seasons, but also at the same time, I understand, because I think the arc that they have been taking with the villain in particular does really lend itself to a final season going in after that season 2 finale. So I'm simultaneously like really upset, but also kind of being like, yeah, it makes sense. But also I keep thinking like maybe afterwards they'll do like a spin-off, because the thing is, like, the title won't make sense because of what happened in the season 2 finale and how season 3 is going to go. So maybe they'll decide to just do a spin-off and take it another direction with a new title and a new kind of premise, but taking place in the same world, maybe hopefully with the same characters, or maybe not. I just think that Freeform should not give up on this universe, because I think it's one of the most original and creative universes that we've seen in recent memory on television, especially in comparison to all of the reboots, rehashes, adaptations that we've seen so recently. It's just been interesting and nice to watch Motherland and be like, yeah, this is wholly original. Like, this feels wholly original, and it is wholly original, which is really refreshing. But season 2 honestly managed to be even better than season 1. I prefer it to season 1. I think it was just really interesting, especially within the character dynamics. I liked how they messed with the dynamics of the relationships that each of the main 3 women have, not only with each other but also with those around them. I think especially Scylla was a highlight of the season. She had such a cool arc, and I love a girl that embraces her kind of like questionable morality, and kind of is not afraid to do the necessary things that need to be done in order to save the greater good. It's it's very in line with Scylla's character, but I think like turned up a notch because of her feelings for Rael and all of that. So I really enjoyed the journey that her character took this year in particular. Also Tally's my favorite character on the whole show. I love her, and I thought her journey this past season was so incredible. I loved everything that had to do with Alder that she was, you know, kind of entangled in and everything like that. It was really interesting. But it's you know, like I said, incredibly sad that the next season will be the last. But if you do end up watching this show, know that there is another season coming. So it's, you know, you're safe to start it. So, but it's really an incredible show. And I think it's so worth it. Because like I said, it's just so original and it's so refreshing. And the actors are so good because they're all like these newcomers, and it's just, it's so good. And this one is, as well, is only 20 episodes. It's on Hulu, available to stream. It's a freeform show, but it is on Hulu to stream. You can stream both seasons there. And then next summer, it should premiere on freeform, and then it also streams like next day on Hulu. So like even if you don't have freeform, you don't have cable, you don't watch on freeform, you can watch it the next day on Hulu. So I would totally, absolutely 100% recommend catching up with the show, watching it. I think it's just a really cool commentary about the military industrial complex. You know, it's like a weird feminist commentary in a way. You know, it's really good. The premise of the show is about witches, if there was witches and if they ran the army. It's just really good. I really enjoy it. So another season that I really enjoyed this year, not a new show of this year, but a new season that came out this year, was season 3 of the CW's Charmed. I binged all 3 seasons of the Charmed reboot this summer, and I really enjoyed it. It was really good. I'm a sucker for a CW show. I think that they just, there's something about them that I just really like, you know, I just really like them. But this one in particular, I think has so much heart, especially the first season has so much heart. And just is wonderful to watch, especially because of the dynamic between the 3 sisters, Mel, Macy, and Maggie. I think the acting was really, really good, and it's just really fun. It's a really fun show that's light and fun to watch, but also deals with topics, you know, topical plot points that I think work really well. And unfortunately, like the season 2 finale kind of, that was their COVID finale, so they didn't get to finish out the season the way that they wanted to. But I do think that in the end, it worked to an extent. You know, it was one of the more rocky, you know, COVID finales, but I still think it worked to a certain extent. But yeah, so anyway, though, season 3 came out this year, and I really loved it. Abigail Jamison Kane is one of my favorite characters. She's my favorite character on the show, and she's one of my favorite characters maybe ever now at this point. I really, really enjoy her character. I think she is similar to a character like Morgana, if you're really into Morgana and Merlin, because she's just kind of like evil, but you know why she's evil, and she, you know, but she's also like redeemable. She goes on this path for redemption in season 3, which I think worked really well. And one of my favorite episodes of the entire season was the one that really was like focused on Abigail, because I just think it worked really well. It was episode 13, I think, season 3, episode 13. And then Maggie as well is my favorite character. I love her. She's my favorite sister. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this season, though, and obviously it ended with, just a fair warning if you decide to watch, the season does end with one of the sisters leaving in a very similar move to the original Charmed, in a very unfortunate parallel to the original Charmed. One of the sisters does leave. And yeah, so it was really sad, but I'm excited to see what they do with the new sister, because they obviously cast someone else, and the 4th season does not premiere on the CW until next March, until March of 2022. So be on the lookout for it. But if you want, you can binge all 3 seasons on Netflix. I think it's totally worth the watch. If you're looking for like a fun, witchy, fun, like magical show, I think it's so worth it. It's really great, especially that first season. Like, even if you don't feel like sitting through 3 seasons of the show, just watch the first one and it's really great. I love it. I adore it. So one of the last shows I want to talk about, I have 2 more, is Sex Lives of College Girls. This is a show that premiered on HBO Max in late November, I think. I don't know. Sometime recently. And I think it was so good. It worked so well. It's a comedy from Mindy Kaling that follows 4 girls who did not know each other prior to college, but this is the story of them becoming roommates, or like they're roommates in college, and this is them becoming like friends and their experience at college. And even though the title Sex Lives of College Girls might make it seem like it's all about sex, and there is a lot of sex in the show, just a fair warning. Don't watch it with your parents, please. Do not watch the show with your parents. It has so much heart. And that's the thing that really like sticks out to me about the show, is it has so much heart, and I think it really gets down to the core of female friendship, because I can, there's multiple moments within the first season that I can see a lesser show pitting the roommates against each other and running with that storyline, but they don't. It just feels like a very accurate portrayal of female friendship and solidarity in their community, but that also doesn't necessarily mean that it's like everybody's friends, and like it's a realistic portrayal of what female friendship is actually like, even with like rivalries and things like that between women. And it's not, I mean, like I said, it's not like the fake like shit where it's like everybody's buddy, it just works really well. I think it works really well, and the acting was really delightful, honestly. And it's a comedy, so it was really funny. I think it had really smart humor. I think it's similar in humor to a movie like Booksmart. It makes me think of Booksmart. It kind of makes me think of Teenage Bounty Hunters in that way. I just think it worked really well. And of course, Leighton is one of the main girls, and she has a storyline about internalized homophobia and kind of coming out as well. And I think that one worked really well. And it's interesting too, because like the amount, because like I said earlier, everybody complains about the amount of coming out stories that there are on TV or in movies, and I mean, yeah, there's a lot, but the thing is that I can't imagine wanting one of them undone. You know what I mean? Like, because it's like no 2 are the same. Like, even just looking at Bradley and Leighton, Bradley from The Morning Show and Leighton from Sex Lives, both of these coming out stories had such different messages, even though they were dealing with virtually the same concept of internalized homophobia. They had different outcomes, they had different meanings behind them, they have different messages, and I just think both of them worked so well, and I think having these 2 stories back to back within the same year prove that like each coming out story, each coming out narrative on television has its own place and is important in that way. So I really liked that. And Renee Rapp, who is queer, she portrays Leighton, and I think she just did an incredible job. It was so good. You can watch this show on HBO Max. It's 10 episodes. Each episode's like 20 minutes long. It's a very quick watch, but it's very delightful, and I think it's a really fun kind of like pick-me-up show. So if you're kind of down, wanting something funny and fresh and light to start the new year, I would definitely check out Sex Lives of College Girls on HBO Max. And finally, my last show that I loved this year was Hawkeye. I love this show. I loved this show. So good. Oh my God. I knew listen, this is the only MCU show that I've actually seen, but I'm so glad that I watched it. Everything about it was just so good. I mean, Haley Steinfeld, this was the third of her shows to premiere in November alone. And she just is so good and so dynamic, and each of those characters was so different to each other. And especially like Kate Bishop is so, I think she's such a vibrant addition to the MCU, and I'm really excited to see where her character goes in the future, especially because of what happened in the finale, which I think is one of my favorite episodes of TV this year. I really enjoyed the finale. I thought it wrapped up everything really well. I think that the highlight of this show was that each of the female characters really got their due. And that is something that I haven't been able to say about Marvel for a long time. You know, I mean, this year in particular was an incredible year for women in Marvel, but that has not been the case for like most every other year. But I think this show really kind of epitomized exactly what good, like what making good on your like we have strong female characters looks like, you know, because it's like Kate got her due, Yelena got her due, Maya got her due, even Eleanor kind of had this interesting arc. And even if she, I mean, the only like kind of dissatisfying thing was I think that moment in the finale came together in a bit of a shaky way. But I think that they obviously did that in order to set up a potential second season, or, you know, a potential continuation of Kate's story. I think it's very clear that they are going to continue Kate's story. And then obviously I mentioned that Yelena was also in this show. I love her so much. I love her. She is the MCU it girl. Obviously, I talked about how much I loved her in the Black Widow movie, in my Black Widow episode, which you could check out from this past summer. I did an episode entirely about Black Widow where I talked about that movie because I loved it. But yeah, so Yelena, I really enjoyed in this show. I think she was a highlight of this show. And also, it made me like Clint Barton. Didn't think it would do that, but I liked him. I really liked him. Like, if you listen to my Black Widow episode, I was fully like, Yelena can just kill him. Like, I don't care. But then when it came time to it, I was like, no, Yelena, you can't kill him. I like him a lot. But yeah, so those are my favorite shows that I watched this year. Hawkeye is available to stream on Disney Plus. It's only 6 episodes, so it's a really quick watch. It's a really quick watch. You can do it in like a day, in like no problem. It's really quick. So that one's on Disney Plus. And I briefly just wanted to mention a couple of movies that I liked this year. I'm not going to go like super in depth with them. I just wanted to mention a couple because, like I said, I really didn't watch a whole lot of new movies this year. I spent a lot of time watching TV. Like, I just didn't watch movies in general, but I watched like old movies. Like yesterday I watched Fighting with My Family, the like WWE movie with Florence Pugh, but that movie's old, you know. It did not come out this year at all. So anyway, so one of my favorites obviously of the year was Black Widow. Like I said, I did an entire episode about Black Widow this summer. You can find up, you know, down on the page. You can find it, it's there. I really like this movie, though. I think it did Black Widow justice. I do truly wish that Natasha had gotten her own trilogy, but, you know, if this single movie was all that we were going to get from her, then I'm glad that we got it because I really did enjoy it. And then another movie that I really liked this year was The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad. I did think that it was a bit too gratuitously violent. I did not look for, a lot of scenes. I had to cover my eyes because I'm very squeamish. But I did think that it was a really well done movie, infinitely better than the 2016 Suicide Squad movie. I hated that movie. It was horrible, horrendous, awful, terrible movie. This one obviously blew it out of the water. I really enjoyed it. I think that it worked really well. I think it's because they really did create that found family in this film. Especially with characters like Ratcatcher 2, who was just so endearing, and even like Polka Dot Man, who I really ended up liking, and then obviously Harley Quinn was so good in this movie, and Peacemaker was just like that asshole that's like, and he's getting his new show on HBO Max. It's like, why that guy? But whatever. Anyway, though, I really like this movie. I think it worked really well. And I think one thing though is that it was frustrating during the release of that movie to watch everybody kind of give James Gunn Kathy Yan's flowers for what he did, because really Kathy Yan made it possible for James Gunn to do the Suicide Squad. Kathy Yan was the first one to do an R-rated DCEU movie. Kathy Yan was the first one to do these like bold colors, crazy, non-chronological storytelling, and I think Birds of Prey worked better than the Suicide Squad did. I liked Birds of Prey better than the Suicide Squad. But yeah, it was interesting to watch as people were like, oh my god, James Gunn saved the DCEU. But it's like, dude, did he? Or did Kathy Yan save the DCEU and then he like picked up the torch and ran with it? I mean, obviously, I'm not like taking any credit away from James Gunn. He's an incredible filmmaker. And, he directed and wrote an incredible movie. But I'm just saying that it's like the concepts and the doors that were opened by Kathy Yan definitely allowed for James Gunn's movie to be made. But I think that's great. I'm excited for more of the DCEU to be built on Harley Quinn and, characters like that. I think we're all, I don't think I can speak for everybody, but for me, it does get kind of tiring to see 1.5 million Superman and Batman movies. Obviously, I know we're getting another Batman movie, but, I'm still excited to see more different characters come into the DCEU and lead them, which is kind of cool. Another movie that I really liked this year was Encanto. I just watched it on Disney Plus recently, and I really liked it. It was really good. I am normally not a Disney movie person. I don't keep up with Disney movies. I've really, in the past, 5 years, the most recent Disney animated movie that I've seen is Frozen 2. That was the last new animated Disney movie that I saw. So I really enjoyed Encanto. I thought it worked really well. The songs were incredible. We Don't Talk About Bruno is everything. It's stuck in my head. And I just think it was really well done. And I enjoyed that there wasn't cackling villain. It was about the family dynamic and the family arguments and narratives. And I think that worked really well. I really enjoyed it. And finally, the last movie that I saw this year that I want to touch on is going to be kind of niche, but it's The Eyes of Tammy Faye. The critic consensus is that the performances of this movie are better than the movie itself, and I would have to agree. The movie itself is not groundbreaking in many ways. It's a biopic, and it feels like it. It feels a little long in some places, but I did really enjoy it because I liked how this movie kind of highlighted how the public treated Tammy Faye, especially in comparison to her husband, who was really the guy that everybody needed to be mad at. And it also highlighted just how good of a person Tammy Faye is. And as somebody with religious trauma, I think that seeing Tammy Faye, because if you don't know, Tammy Faye was this, well, she's still alive, but she is no longer a televangelist. She was a televangelist with her husband, Jim Baker. Sorry, I couldn't remember his last name. Jim Baker. And they created the Christian Broadcasting Network. They had shows, and like they did all this stuff. They had a theme park, you know, it was kind of crazy. And eventually they were found out to have been like embezzling money and stealing, and they were in debt, and Jim went to jail for a long time. And the public kind of ended up using Tammy Faye as the person that they made fun of because of it. She was drag mama. She was drag. She's very similar, I think, to Dolly Parton, in that she had a very similar style with the crazy hair and the wigs and the makeup and everything, and but she genuinely seemed like the type of person that actually just like cared about others, and wasn't a Republican disguised as a religious person, you know, like, because she in real life had an AIDS patient on call for one of her shows, and she talked to this AIDS patient on her show on national television on the Christian Broadcasting Network, and informed her Christian audience about AIDS and the AIDS epidemic. And specifically, she was like, you know, I wish that I could hug you. And he said, you know, a lot of people don't hug me, and because they think that it's contagious. And she says, you know, I think the world would be better if we hugged each other. You know, it was a really wonderful moment in the film to see them recreate that. And it's a wonderful moment if you just look it up on YouTube. It's great. I mean, I don't know. I really liked how they portrayed Tammy Faye as a person in this movie. And Jessica Chastain plays Tammy Faye, and she, like, they did all kinds of like prosthetics on her. She looks kind of crazy, but she did a really wonderful job. I mean, I agree that the performances are better than the movie. And also, everyone's favorite guy right now, Andrew Garfield, is in it. He plays Jim Baker. So I think it worked really well. I really enjoyed it. And the final sequence of the film was really, really wonderful. I went to go see it alone in a theater, and I enjoyed it. It was a really wonderful experience. But yeah, so anyway, that is all I've got. Definitely let me know what your favorite shows and movies were that you watched throughout 2021. I'm really excited to hear it. I definitely want to know what you guys have been watching. Also, obviously, Supergirl did not make it on this list, but it's just because I spent most of 2021 talking about Supergirl in a bunch of different episodes, so you can go listen to my thoughts about Supergirl in other episodes. I wanted to highlight some shows that I normally don't talk about, you know, or that I haven't done these like weekly recaps of. So Supergirl is there in spirit, obviously, but yeah. So anyway, that is all I have. Let me know what you guys think. Don't forget to rate, like, share, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.